Hello, and thank you for joining us for this recorded interview which we had with the American author Chad Bird, who spoke to us recently from his home in Texas via Zoom about his brand new book, Unveiling Mercy. We had a few technical issues when we recorded the video, but we hope that that doesn't take away from your enjoyment.
Chad, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's great that you're that we can see you and chat to you here from Belfast right to Texas. So thank you for giving up your time to do this.
Well, thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this. Get to talk about the work that I do, and to have this chance to let other people view the videos so they can listen in on the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely brilliant. Obviously, this is going to be a very serious conversation. It's going to be very deep. There's going to be a lot of very difficult questions to ask. So I'm going to just go straight into that from the outset and ask you, is it easier for you to write a really big, deep theological work, or is it easier to grow such an amazing looking beard? Because I've dabbled in both. I've tried my skills at writing. I've tried the whole growth thing, but I have to say, hats off to you. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. I have a friend who has a pretty full beard, and he calls it his gospel beard. Because
Wow.
he says when people compliment his beard, he says, "Well, I really don't have anything to do with it. It just grows, just like grace. It just happens,
Wow.
thanks to the thanks to the gift of God." So, yeah, I started growing this. My wife calls it my COVID beard. So it has been growing for a while. We've actually had to trim it. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
but she likes it. I like it. So I guess it's a keeper.
Well, it's a win-win. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's been probably a lot of sort of different things tried out over COVID. So yeah, no, that's obviously one of the positive effects of it. I have to say.
Yes, true. This is true.
There may be people who'll be watching this that maybe don't know of the name of Chad Bird. Could you tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I work for an organization called 1517. You can find all their material at 1517.org. I am basically, I produce content for them. So they call me a scholar in residence. More or less what I do is I write for them, both articles and books, produce a number of podcasts, videos, um, anything and everything that I can do to use my own educational background and experience to translate that into either the written word or the spoken word to get the gospel out to people. So that's really what 1517 is all about. We want to get the gospel out to as many people in as many ways as possible. So I work full time for them. My background is kind of all over the place. I was in the academy for a while. I taught at a seminary for a few years, taught Hebrew and Old Testament. I served as a Lutheran pastor for a few years. For a number of years, I was just in kind of the secular workforce in transportation. I drove a truck for a number of years. So kind of coming from what we call here a blue collar background, just typical worker, but then also have some time both as a student as well as a professor. So that's my background. It's what I do. I'm married. My wife Stacy, and together we have 4 children and now 3 grandchildren. We just had a granddaughter born not very long
Oh,
ago.
congratulations.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful gift, and we
Yeah.
live in what I always call the greatest state of the United States, Texas. So my wife and I are both lived in Texas most of our lives.
Wow. And what you mentioned there about the Old Testament, I think is really your passion in many ways. What was it, or what led you to do the teaching, the academic side of things?
When I was a student in the seminary, I had a number of classes with a professor who had it was almost sort of a grandfatherly way of teaching. He really drew you in. He made it feel like he was just talking to you, he wasn't lecturing you, just talking to you as if you were his grandson, if you will. And he drew me into a real love of the Old Testament, because what he always took us back to was the fact that in one way or another, every passage in the Old Testament is leading us to Christ. And that was new to me. I grew up in the church. I grew up with sort of a moralistic understanding of the Old Testament, that the main purpose of these stories was to teach us right from wrong, kind of a religious version of Aesop's fables, if you will.
Mm.
But what this professor did is he opened up to me the scriptures as the testimony to Christ, that this story in Genesis or this prophecy in Isaiah or this Psalm of David, all of these in one way or another were either directly or indirectly leading us to Christ. And when I kind of had that Emmaus Road experience, I began to just dive into the Old Testament and realize the truth of what he was teaching us. And that just created this desire that I still have to do the same thing for other people, to, in my writings, podcastings, in my teachings, to open up the scriptures to show them how this points to Christ. This is talking about Christ. Because I think for most people, the Old Testament is just kind of this mysterious book, really don't know what to do with it. And when they do use it, a lot of times it just tends to be moralized rather than actually mined for the Christological jewels that are embedded within it.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of people, Christians, people who are almost afraid of, not afraid of the Old Testament, but they are, they would tend to sort of look towards the New Testament more. So do you find that there are people who you bring into your classes? There are more people sort of learning to turn to the Old Testament more, just to find those hidden jewels, as you describe them?
Yeah, I encounter more and more situations where people are, once they kind of get a taste, whether maybe it's through the podcast 40 Minutes in the Old Testament, or maybe it's through something I or somebody else have written, once they get a taste of what is there, they want more. You just take a typical example, the book of Leviticus, not most people's favorite book to turn to, right? But when you give people the means by which to read this with a Christ lens, when you point out, okay, all these sacrifices are leading to Good Friday, or all these activities of the priest are leading to the priesthood of Christ, or the tabernacle and the furnishings in the tabernacle. All of these are telling us about the sacrificial priestly ministry of Jesus. Once you kind of get that in your mind and you begin to read through Leviticus, you realize, hey, Leviticus is just the gospel according to Leviticus. Same thing with Exodus, same thing with Genesis, same thing with the Psalms, that when you encounter the centrality of Christ there, that then makes you want to study more and to learn more. And I'm having more and more experiences where people are actually having those sorts of epiphanies where they see Christ in the Old Testament and they want to learn more.
Yeah, I love that. I completely empathize with that. I went through a period there where I was just, I decided to read whole books of the Bible, which I hadn't done for such a long time. And I think I actually just started with Hebrews. And Hebrews then led me to Leviticus. And exactly the same way as you described it, reading it through Christ-like eyes. And I have to say, Leviticus blew me away when you start to read something like that. And I've told people, I said, I read the book of Leviticus, and they look at me going, it's totally reading it through gospel eyes is it's a whole new different way of it just makes it alive. It makes it real. It makes it alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like to call Hebrews the best and the cheapest commentary you can get on the Old Testament.
That's good. That's a great tagline, without a doubt. You have a brand new book just out called Unveiling Mercy, which is a 365-day devotional. Just tell us a little bit about that and what led you to want to write this.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that when I was a seminary student that I fell in love with the Old Testament. At the same time, I guess you could say fell in love for the first time with the Hebrew language. I had taken a Hebrew at university 2 or 3 years before I was at seminary, and I can't say that I actually liked Hebrew back then. But when I began to love the Old Testament, I thought, I really need to get back into my Hebrew even more deeply than I had been. So I did that, and when I did, I actually liked it more than when I took it as a student. So I began to expand my knowledge, expand my vocabulary. Eventually, I ended up a few years later teaching Hebrew for a number of years. I went to Hebrew Union College, where I studied for 3 years. And at that point, I was able to take modern Hebrew. I was able to learn a later form of Hebrew called Rabbinic Hebrew. So I spent hours every day in Hebrew as well as Greek when I was doing my graduate studies. And I've kept that up over the course of the years. Well, I I realized that there's such a richness in the Hebrew that simply can't be communicated fully adequately in translation. There's always, of course, something that is missing in the translation.
Mm.
So the more I thought about what book I wanted to write next, the more I thought, well, why don't I take some of these things that I've learned from the Hebrew language and incorporate those into a devotional book, which is what I ended up doing. I took words and phrases, beginning with Genesis 1, verse 1, and then I worked my way all through the rest of the Old Testament. So it follows the English order of the books, which is different from the Hebrew order of the books. So I begin with Genesis, end with Malachi. Every book has at least one or two examples from it of what we can learn from the Hebrew. Some of this is just unpacking a little bit of what the Hebrew word means. Some of it is talking about the word plays that you can't really see in translation. Uh, Almost every single devotion bridges the gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And every single one of them is really designed to do what I talked about earlier, to bring us to Christ. So on a typical devotion, you'll have the title, the Hebrew word in Hebrew, the biblical verse, the devotion, and then it concludes with a prayer, many of which are taken from the book of Psalms. So that's kind of the way that they're structured, and they're all, as it were, designed to kind of usher us from the Old Testament into the New Testament, into the presence of Christ.
Wonderful. And I mean, obviously, as for me, from my point of view, I'm a bookseller. This time of the year that we're recording this, devotionals, daily devotionals are something that would be bought and sold quite quickly, you know, for people, for gifts, for whatever. People who want a New Year's resolution to want to be able to do something and continue doing it. You said yourself there about the Hebrew language. It was something that you know, that can be quite off-putting for some people. How accessible have you made it for them? Do you need to know your Hebrew words to be able to pick this up and read it, or is this for somebody even like me who can't even pronounce a Hebrew word?
Yeah, yeah. No, I specifically wrote this for someone who may have never even heard of Hebrew, honestly, that doesn't know anything about Hebrew. So the only Hebrew on the page is at the top. It's the words of the day. But when I talk about that particular Hebrew word, I write it in English, and then I explain fully what the Hebrew means in very clear English. In other words, this is not a scholarly work in the sense of I'm writing for scholars or I'm writing for people who already know Hebrew. And I specifically wrote for a general audience of people who love the scriptures, want to learn more about the scriptures, and especially want to learn more about how the scriptures are the witness of Christ. So no pre-knowledge of Hebrew is required.
Chad, could you read for us an extract from your book or one of your devotions, just to give us
Yeah,
a feel
yeah,
of?
sure. I would be happy to. This is one of my favorites. Uh, this is from a well-known psalm, Psalm 23. The title is "Pursued by Mercy," and in this particular one, this is for September 22nd. I'm talking about the Hebrew verb radaf. So here's the translation that I have there. I think this is ESV. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And here's my devotion. In the Hebrew of Psalm 23, goodness and mercy do not follow us all the days of our lives. That translation is far too bloodless for the verb radaf. It means to chase after, like Abram in armed pursuit of his enemies, Pharaoh hounding Israel even into the sea, or Barak breathing down Sisera's neck. When you radaf someone, you don't lollygag behind them at a safe distance. You go hard and heavy until you reach them or die trying. Obstacles don't matter. No effort is too great. Radaf is a verb that packs a punch. It's full of energy, sweat, and an unswerving commitment to reach your goal. The goodness and mercy of God do not follow us like a good little puppy dog letting us lead the way. They chase us down labyrinthine paths like Francis Thompson's Hound of Heaven. They gallop after us like a celestial stallion. They stay hot on our heels. The goodness and mercy of Jesus Christ radaf us all the way to heaven's gate and into the arms of our waiting and smiling Heavenly Father. So that's one sample. And that particular example is like a lot of these. What I'm trying to do is take a word and demonstrate that even though we thank God for translation, there's only so much a translation can do. There's only so much a translation can carry from one language over to another language. And sometimes we just need an unpacking of that particular word so that we can get the full ramifications of what is being communicated.
Yeah, and even just in that example, like everyone, you'd think they know Psalm 23 backwards. And then suddenly, you just take a Hebrew word within that and you completely change the dimension of it. And suddenly people, you think you know it so well, and then suddenly, yeah, I never thought of it that way before. I never looked at it that way before. And I'm sure that there will be
Yeah.
loads of examples of that through your book as well. Was there anything that maybe surprised you as you went through it?
Yeah, actually, I learned something almost with every single one of these that I wrote. Now, it might be just a small bit of information I didn't know before, and sometimes it was something that I had no idea was there. Let me just give you a couple examples. I can't find them just off the top of my head in the book, but I can just tell you from memory. So one of these was we hear in the Gospels how Jesus will speak of people being cast into the darkness and where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay. Well, the whole time I grew up in church, every time I heard that particular phrase, gnashing of teeth, I'm imagining someone in great pain. That's what I thought the metaphor was intended to convey. And then when I was writing the book, I realized, okay, there's a Hebrew background to gnashing of teeth. Jesus isn't just kind of making up this phrase. It occurs actually about 5 or 6 times in the Old Testament. So I looked those up. Turns out every single time that gnashing of teeth is described in the Hebrew, it's not describing pain, it's describing anger. Somebody is angry, and as a result, they gnash their teeth. Now, when I learned that, and by the way, that's every single instance of that verb in the Hebrew in the Old Testament deals with people being angry. So you take that and you move that over into the Gospels, and you realize what Jesus is describing in most of those situations is when people who thought they were in, kind of the religious elites of the day, when Jesus described them being cast out, they are gnashing their teeth. Why? Because they are angry. They're angry at God. They're angry at the situation that they're in. They're angry at those maybe who are brought into the kingdom while they themselves are excluded. So it opened up my eyes to a very different meaning of that particular phrase than I had thought before. So that's one example. Another example is in the great vision that Ezekiel has of the valley of dry bones. There's one particular verse that describes a sort of a rumbling that takes place when all these bones are coming together. Well, when I was doing my research, I realized that particular verb, Hebrew verb, actually can mean, and often does mean, an earthquake. And then I began to look at other instances in Scripture where this was used, and I realized that earthquakes are very often connected with resurrection scenes. And then my mind went to the Gospels, and I realized, yeah, that's exactly what Matthew describes. There is an earthquake, and what happens at the earthquake? You have the bodies of these saints who are coming out of their tombs. So I was able to trace through the Old Testament several instances where that particular Hebrew verb of the earthquaking was connected with the resurrection, and that gave me an added insight into what was happening in the Gospels when you have an earthquake there. So I think that one is called resurrection and the Richter scale or something like that anyway. But those are a couple examples where I didn't know that this was going on, but through my research, I was able to learn that. And that's, of course, always exciting for an author, because then I can take what I've learned and communicate that to other people as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, you've written 3 books prior to this. Was it easier or harder to have to write 365 individual devotions?
I've thought about that more than once. I think in some ways it was. I think in some ways it was harder, to be honest, only because. Well, I guess you can compare it to what's easier to run one marathon or to run 55 Ks. Well, because I'm a runner, that's a illustration that I can understand. Well, I mean, in some ways, it's harder to run, the large number of small races, and that's kind of the way it felt when I was writing this. So I could, if I had all day, I could probably write on a good day. I could write 4 or 5 of these on if I had all day to write. And then the next day I'd sit down at my computer and I'm 4 or 5 more. So when I began this, I thought, I no big deal. I can do this. But it does feel like kind of a snail's pace as you go along. You go 5, and then you're at 10, and then finally you get to 100, and you feel like you've accomplished something. But you realize you still have a whole lot more to go. So it was harder in that way. It was easier only in the sense that when I've discovered in writing books that you have to keep so much in mind when you're writing a typical book. You have to keep in mind, okay, this is where I've been, this is where I'm going. I don't want to repeat myself, but I don't want to say something now that I want to say for later. You really have to put yourself into this big space and keep yourself there for a long period of time so that you know where you've been and where you're going. With a devotional, it's different. You're each of these is just one page, and so you can put yourself into it. You can write it, you can set it aside, and then you can move on to the next one. You don't have to worry so much about always keeping this big picture in mind as you're writing. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes and no. It was harder in some ways. It was easier in other ways.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the running analogy as well, and I'm sure a lot of people will hearing that will be able to relate to it as well. Is
Yeah.
there is there going into who you are, Chad, in your writing? Is there a particular author or church father who's been a big influence to you as you sort of developed in your ministry?
Yeah, of course, a number of them have been influential on me. I'm part of the Lutheran tradition, so of course, Martin Luther has been a heavy influence on me. But outside of my own tradition, 2 names come to mind for different reasons. Um, the first of these is the church father, Saint Irenaeus, second century church father. When I was a very young seminary student, I was in a class that I was not qualified to be in, but I was in there anyway. And the professor had me do some research on the connection between the incarnation and the Eucharist in the theology of Saint Irenaeus. Well, I didn't know who Saint Irenaeus was. I barely knew what the Eucharist was, but this put me in the position where I had to learn, and so I spent a huge amount of time that semester reading all through his works against the heretics, finding out more about Irenaeus, discovering his incarnational theology and how it connects with so many other aspects of theology. And I fell in love with Irenaeus during that particular semester. So I still return to him because I think his teaching on the incarnation, which was, of course, directed against the Gnostics of his day, that became extremely influential on me and my grasp of the impact of the incarnation on our theology still today. So Irenaeus is one, and then jumping way ahead to more modern times, C.S. Lewis. I'm by no means a C.S. Lewis expert. I do love his material, but I think above all else, what I love about C.S. Lewis and what I try in my limited sort of way to emulate is that here you have a man who has this breadth of knowledge. He's a scholar, so he could write something that would speak to other scholars, and of course he did that on occasion. But what he tried to do is he tried to take what he had learned and to translate that into prose that is beautiful and clear and accessible by just about anyone. And that is, in essence, what I try in my own limited way to do. I have my educational background. I spent some time as a professor, but really what I want to do is I want to write in such a way that's clear, that's beautiful, and that's accessible for just about anybody. Uh, Theology is not meant for the academy. Theology is meant for the people who gather around our Lord's altar, who gather around His Word. So those are the people that I really want to communicate to, not in any way dumbing anything down, but instead to take this weighty theology and but to communicate it in a way that people can understand, and not just understand, but can grasp some of the beauty that is there as well. So that's one of the reasons I try in my writings to write in in a very picturesque, in a poetic sort of way, so that people can appreciate exactly what is there in the Word of God, and can kind of capture what is there that God wants them to hear.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I mean, C.S. Lewis has been such an influence for a lot of people. And actually, where we're recording this right now, we are right in the heart of C.S. Lewis territory. There's a C.S. Lewis Square
Nice.
is where we're just overlooking, with a big sort of giant
Oh,
Aslan
wow, that's
statue has
nice.
been built. So yes, where our shop is, C.S. Lewis is the house that he was born in. Is just literally behind where we are. So yeah, good.
Oh,
I got to. You have to
oh,
come over, Chad. You see, it's just
I
this
would
place
love
is just
to.
calling you
Yeah.
over.
I would love to. It's on my very short list of places that I definitely want to go to. My wife would love to go there as well. So we are very hopeful that once we kind of get past the craziness and the restrictions of the pandemic, that an opportunity will open up for us to go there. We would both love to.
Yeah, we'd love to see you over here. Obviously, you've been on our agenda for a long time, and wanting to perhaps get you over, but being able to do this is the next best thing. So that's we're
Yeah.
glad of that. I know obviously it is hard to make plans and to look ahead to what 2021 could bring. But what are you hoping to do? What have you got sort of on the back burner that you're hoping to do next year?
Well, I've already written my next book. It will be put out, I think, in the summer of 2021. It's another book by 1517 Publishing, as was this last one, Unveiling Mercy. So this one will be entitled "The Christ Key: Unlocking the Centrality of Christ in the Old Testament," and the title basically gives away exactly what it's all about. I what I want to do is kind of take people into this mansion of the Old Testament, and to show them that there's rooms all over the place. There's rooms of Genesis, the rooms of Leviticus, the rooms of Deuteronomy, everything else, and and the key that opens each of these is Christ. When you walk in, you discover that the content of the room is Christ as well. So that's my goal. It's a book that's actually based on a 1517 academy class that I taught called Christ in the Old Testament, which people can find at 1517.org. So this book will go along with that particular class. So that one is written. I haven't decided exactly what I want to do next as far as a book goes. Throwing around a few ideas. It might be kind of a general overall survey, kind of a field guide, if you will, to the Old Testament, because a lot of people have trouble kind of getting the big picture in their minds about what the Old Testament is about. So that book would serve that purpose. But I keep a whole list of books that I that I want to write, so it should keep me busy for a while. But I'll be doing that. I'll be working on uh, some other coursework that I will be incorporating into the 1517 Academy class in the future. I'm going to have my podcast, 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. We will continue to work our way through the scriptures, as well as the other podcast on the 1517.org network that I'm involved in. So there's always plenty to keep me occupied.
Unveiling Mercy is available to buy through our website at thebookwell.co.uk. Just click on there and search for Unveiling Mercy. Our thanks once again to Chad for giving up his time to speak to us, and also to Lisa Curry from East Belfast Partnership for allowing us the use of their facilities to record the Zoom. Our thanks too to Andrew Green for initiating the conversation in the first place. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you again very soon.